Time for a cylinder head installation. Welcome to Hackaweek. Hey, I'm excited. We're getting a cylinder head put on this engine, which means I get to button up the top end pretty soon. After that, we'll get back down to the bottom end and all the stuff that goes on the sides. But today, we're going to focus on what it's going to take to put the cylinder head on and torque it down. Are you excited? I'm excited. We're going to put a cylinder head on this thing today. First thing I want to do is put a little bit of gasket sealer on that base gasket on the cylinders. I've lifted it up a tiny bit after getting all the pistons at equal distances. They're all even with each other right now. I lifted this up, probably about 15, 16 millimeters, enough to get in there with a small brush and a little bit of liquid gasket material. I'm going to paint some on top of the gasket, raise it up, stick it to the bottom of the cylinders, and go back in and paint a little onto the crankcase. What I'm going to use is Permatex liquid gasket material. It's a good old gasket material, been around forever. Aviation Permatex it's called. So we'll put some of that on there now, and once we get that done, we can move on to getting the head on top of here and all the goodies that go with that. Here's the stuff I'm going to use. Good old Permatex Aviation Forma gasket. This is good stuff. I love it. I've used it for years. You shake it up a little bit. I've warmed it up a little bit to make it flow a little easier. It's pretty cold today. What are we at here in the shop right now? 58 degrees, which is quite bearable considering it's 30 outside. But we're going to get some of this up in there now. And I'm going to take the brush out of the can and put that aside because I'm going to use this brush instead. I've got you zoomed in pretty tight here because I want you to see just what's going on. A little bit of this on a brush. We're just going to go a little at a time, and I'm going to put some just on this top part of this gasket here. Spread it out really thin. It's not going to take very much at all. Just want a nice little thin layer there just to add a little extra insurance and making sure everything is sealed up really well. So you get the general idea. I'm just going to brush it in here until I go all the way around the whole gasket. I got a nice layer of it all the way around now, so I'm going to take a plastic spatula and push the gasket up against the bottom of the cylinders and just get it to stick in place right there. It should stick okay. I think there's enough on there to do that. Okay, now that I've got that stuck in place, I can get a little bit of this stuff onto the crankcase. Same thing, just a nice thin layer. We're going to go all the way around. You can see I've got just a little layer of it all the way around. Keep it away from those O-rings back there. You really don't need to have it on those. They do okay on their own. Now we'll go ahead and lower that cylinder down onto the crankcase. All right, we're ready to go. Just give it a few taps with the dead blow. Pull the chain up. Make sure that the chain tensioner is down where it's supposed to be. Yes, indeed it is. Everything looks okay, so we'll continue to pound. First thing is clean everything up. You want everything super sterile clean, no oil residue at all. So I've got a rag here with some parts cleaner on it. Lift this chain up out of the way, and I'm going to clean off everything of any kind of oil at all. Get it good and clean. Next up, let's look in those cylinders, make sure there's no foreign matter or debris in there. We don't want anything in there that's going to mess anything up later. Make sure that's all good. Now we'll go ahead and put the head gasket on. I'm going to get this out of my way for a minute. Bring the head gasket up like this, grab the chain, The head gasket will only go one way. If you get it wrong, it won't go on and line up with these holes right here. If you've got it wrong, this section right here will be offset a little bit to one side and it just won't line up. We'll put this back in here for a minute. We got 2 O-rings to put in right here. One there and one there. That's on that oil gallery. Make sure there's no weird stuff going on there. Drop those in. Now we're ready to put the cylinder head on. Okay, just like up on the cylinder, we want to make sure the cylinder head is nice and clean. So we're going to wipe this all down with some parts cleaner. Make sure there's no debris in the combustion chambers. Okay, final check up top. We've got the gasket in place. Make sure you've got the alignment dowels in there, one on each corner on the exhaust side. There's one there and there's one there. Those are really important to make sure that the head is aligned properly. Now we'll lift that up there, and then we need to get the chain through this slot. So what I'll probably do is put a wire on this chain so that I can grab it and pull it up through the head. I've got a little bungee cord that should do the trick. Let's just hook that onto the chain. And I'll go ahead and get that run through the cylinder head, like so. It's fun when you're working by yourself. You get real creative. Okay, so we can just hang on to that and pull it through as I get the head up here. And just keep the slack out of it. Nice thing about the bungee is you can pull it ahead of time, put a little bit of tension on it, and it'll just kind of work for you. You'll just drop the cylinder head down on there. There we go. Let's put that pipe back in here to hold this in place for us. Let's take a peek in there and make sure everything looks good, and it does. I'm going to push on the cam chain tensioner back here, make sure that's free. Yep, everything moves okay. Alright, now we can bolt this thing down. Here's all the hardware that holds the head on. There's 16 flat washers, there are 16 flange nuts, 5 flange bolts, 6mm by 35mm in length, and 1 flange bolt that is 6mm by 90mm in length. Okay, let's just double check things. Cam chain tensioner is okay, moves okay. Everything's pushed down like it ought to be. I'm on the alignment dowels okay. Now let's put some washers on. Well, these have a flat side and they have a side that's got a little bit of a curl to them the way they were cut. So I put the flattest side down. Let's put those over here. Get a handful of them going. The 4 that are recessed, here's a little trick to get at recessed studs. Put it on a screwdriver, put the screwdriver tip on the stud, and then just let it fall down onto it. And you don't have to try to fish your way in there. Now I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the threads and a tiny bit on the washer. You know, the jury's out on that. It's another one of those things where it's debatable. Some people say, oh no, you're supposed to torque stuff dry. That way you get a more accurate reading. I disagree. I think the less friction you're overcoming between the bolt and the threads, the more that you're actually able to put a nice even load on it. And you're not measuring friction, you're actually measuring more of the tension that's on the bolt and nut assembly. That's what I think. So all you engineers out there can argue with me all you want. I'm going to keep doing it this way. I've been doing it this way forever and ever, and it's worked good for me all these years, so I'm just going to keep doing it. If it didn't work well, I wouldn't do it. Aw, nuts. Be careful you don't drop anything down into the crankcase. I should have had a a rag over this a long time ago. Shame on me. Let's go ahead and get the nuts on. Get them all started. I got hollered at last episode too for not having my safety glasses on when I was blasting air. Yeah, I know. But you know, hey, I was staying away from the hole and all that. But yeah, that's good suggestion. You got me. You caught me doing a bad thing there. So, yep. When you're blasting things with air, put those safety goggles on. We'll just spin these down now by hand. No torquey just yet. That takes care of the nuts. Now we get those bolts in. And I'm going to use a magnet tool here. Drop them in that way. Get one down in there. Oh, you know what? I'm going to put a little oil on these too. Just tiny bit up here on the head. And just a little tiny bit. Thin oil, really lightweight oil. This is not like heavy motor oil. So it'll dissipate and spread out quite a bit once it's down there in the threads. Let's cover up that gaping maw that wants to swallow up my bolts. Hold that with a screwdriver so I can take the magnet back off. Ones on the end, use a 1/4" drive socket. Just barely fits in that hole. And we're just going to take that where it bottoms out and stop. Okay, now we're ready to get out the torque wrench. Time for some charts and graphs, boys and girls. There we go. There's the order that you torque these down in. Do not deviate from that. It's a very important step. Do it just the way it says there. Go by the numbers. And let's look up the torque specs now. I work from a bunch of different manuals because some of them have better pictures than others. The Haynes manuals always have the torque specs at the beginning of the chapter. So right here, there we go. We have torque wrench settings. Ooh, right there. So there's your little moment to pause and write all that crap down or do a screen grab. So let's see. We've got cylinder head cover screws. No, that's not what we want. Cylinder head bolts, 6 millimeter. That's the small ones. Those go to 8 foot-pounds. The cylinder head nuts, they go to 15 foot-pounds. So just like all of the other torquing I have done in these videos, I'm going to get my chart right here where I can see it. I'm just going to use a ratchet and go just barely snug to start with, like that. Just pull on it with a finger and then we'll follow the pattern and just get them all snug. That's one time around. Now we'll use the torque wrench. Let's set this on the first pass. Like I told you on other videos, I usually do 2 passes. So on the first pass, I'm going to go to 10 foot-pounds. Somebody said last week, if I put my hand here, I'm going to throw off the torque. Well, I do that to keep it from doing this and cocking off to one side. Because if it does that too much, A, you can slip. B, that will actually change your torque too because you're now off axis from the bolt. So the reason I keep it like that, I don't hold it here, I don't hold it back here. If you held it here, sure, that would throw off the torque. If you just, all you're after is holding it straight down onto the bolt or nut, and it will actually give you a more accurate. So there's the first one to 10 foot-pounds. Number 2. You can see how this jumps all over the place on the chart. It starts out here, it goes 1, 2, 3, then 4 is way over here, 5 is here, and then it goes 6 back over to here, and then 7 is here, 8 is way back over here. So you see, dances around a lot. Where was I? 3. Got 3. 4. Okay, everybody is at 10. Now I'll go up to the final 15. And finally, number 16. Okay, now I'm going to go around one more time, but I'm going to go this way and then this way, just to check them. Now these guys, I'll just use common sense. We'll just go the one in the front first. Just get it snug. Go to the one in the back and just snug on that one. And the same thing here. We'll just we're gonna have to get an extension on that one. There's 10 foot-pounds on that one. 10 on that one. Actually, I'll go over to this end, work my way back into the middle. Now, since I tightened up those bolts, I'm going to be really anal and go back and go over all the head nuts one more time at 15 foot-pounds, just because. See, a little bit more. 15. So how about that? It's worth going back over them again. And I'll probably go back to the 10mm ones again as well. They're all going just a little bit more. So really glad I'm checking them out. And I'll just about bet you now, if I go back and check those 10mm ones again, they'll turn just a tiny bit more before they click. Let's see. Nope, they're okay. They've probably got a pretty fair amount of stretch going on. A little bit more on this one. And don't forget, when you're all done, to unwind the tension on your torque wrench. Now we get to move on to the rocker arm assemblies. These guys go on next. And everything that you need to put those on is in this little container right here. These are the seals that go on these holes right here and cover up the bolt holes, because otherwise oil in here would be able to get down and leak out everywhere. So if you've got an oil leak at the fins, check those out. That may be what's going on. There's also some small O-rings that go right here on the oil passageways. These are the bolts that go in there. There are also some nuts, and these 4 alignment dowels go there, 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 and there. That's what aligns the rocker arm assemblies, the cam towers, the rocker arm towers, rocker arm holders, whatever you want to call them. That's what holds them in place and lines them up perfectly. So let's go ahead and get those dowel pins in there as a first step. I'm living dangerously with that hole wide open like that. Totally living dangerously. Now, I'm not 100% sure about right here. There's supposed to be, I guess, a oil metering little valve jet, whatever. There's a small device that goes in there. I couldn't see that on the websites anywhere, but it does show up in the drawing in the book, but it doesn't seem to be a part that's available. So I'm a little unsure what to do there, but I think for now I'm going to let it go and put it all together as is. I mean, it's still going to flow oil okay. I can only feature, the only reason they would restrict that would be to maybe get a little more pressure down below than up on the top. Anybody knows about that, shout it out there in the comment section down below. I'm going to do a little looking to see if anything comes up with that. But anywho, let's move on. Take this little brass punch, just give these dowel pins a little tap. Make sure they're seated all the way home. There's 4 little O-rings. One goes there, one goes there, one goes there, and one goes there. Let's put those in place. Now we can get the bolt hole gaskets put in place. There are 6 of those altogether. We're going to make sure that all these surfaces are nice and clean. No debris in there, everything looks good. Now I'm going to take the rocker arm assembly and clean that really well. Make sure there's nothing on the bottom of it. And let me make sure I've got the right one in the right spot. Yes, I do. I'm putting it back together the exact way it came apart because that's the way the cam was worn into these. It's always a good idea to put it back together the same way because things tend to wear into each other. And it's best to leave them that way if you're going to just use the same parts and put it all back together. Okay. So that takes care of that. We'll get that one on next. O-rings are in place. Bolt seals are in place. Alignment dowels are in there. And that one's on. Now, the cover right here for the camshaft, there's a little 2 letters stamped on the side. And on the top of this, there's also 2 letters. So you just match those letters up and you're good to go. I'm going to take out the shafts that hold the rocker arms in place. Just give those a little push. I'm going to keep these lined up on the bench where they're supposed to go as well. Same reason why you put the cam back in the same way. Just going to keep everything so that it can go back in exactly the way it came out. The reason we're pulling all this stuff apart is it so we can drop the camshaft in there. Clean off the camshaft journals. Remember the flange goes toward the alternator side of the bike. I got the gear holding it right here. I got the camshaft here. Just got to kind of run everything through here at once. I did this once before in another video when I was checking things out. So if you want to refresh your memory, you could always go back to that one as well, I suppose. Takes a little patience. Just keep working your way across. So we're going to start over here on the chain rail side. We'll get that side on first and then you can move it over onto here. I'm going to show you a view from this side. See the position that gear is in right now? It allows it to drop down far enough where you can actually get the chain on there. Now we'll get the nuts and washers put in place first on the camshaft journal caps. We're just going to spin those on finger tight. Now we drop the 6mm by 57mm bolts into the camshaft journal caps. So the usual drill, we're just going to snug these up first. Now we'll torque the camshaft journal nuts and bolts to 8 foot-pounds. Just going to slowly creep up on that. It's going to squish a little because of that rubber seal that's underneath there. So there'll be a little bit of turning before we take up all that slack. Okay, all that's torqued up, but we are not going to put the rocker arms back in there just yet because we need to time the camshaft next. Okay, that's as far as we're going to go right now because the next step would be to time the camshaft. I can't put the rocker arms on until I do that. If I put the rocker arms on and I start rotating the engine around and the lobes come up and need to move and bang into things, you could potentially hit a piston against a valve and then you can't really rotate the camshaft into the position you need to if you've got all that tension going on. So this is where we time the camshaft before all of the rocker arms go back on. That's going to be for the next episode. Awesome, I got a head on this thing. It's great. Next time we're going to do the camshaft timing. I want to devote an entire episode to that because it's a pretty critical step in the building of any engine. Camshaft timing is very critical. If you get it wrong, you could destroy all your work in just one rotation of the crankshaft. So I'll explain how all that's going to work in the next episode. Looking forward to that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the donations. And until next time. Next time we will focus on timing the camshaft. I want to devote one episode to that because it's such a critical step in the process. Beer.